The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. You're listening to Paranormal Concept right here on Parasearch UK Radio with your host, Paul Rook.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and on tonight's show, I'm joined by the ever-lovely Kerry Greenaway. Hello, Kerry.
Bonjour. How are you?
Oh, I'm not too bad, thank you. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. I'm recovering.
Recovering from what?
From last night.
that was a good night. What are you talking about?
All will come clear, everybody, is all I can say in the future. Or is it the past?
Well, another dimension, possibly.
Oh, possibly even a different dimension.
Oh dear, with a can of beans and a whisk.
Yeah, that's all you need. And a bit of lightning.
That's saving the garden from months. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness me.
That was a funny night. That was a really good night. I needed that. That was a good laugh.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on today's show, we're going all French on everybody.
Yes, we are.
On a subject until last week, I knew absolutely nothing about.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
It is, and for those that don't know, and including myself, we're going to be talking about Rennes-le-Château. That's right?
I assume so. I mean, I'm not French, so I would sort of think it was more like Rennes-le-Château. But, you know.
Yeah, I prefer my accent. That's a lot better. I can understand that one better. Oh, dear.
I may do this in my French accent all night. I'm not going to, don't worry, everybody.
Go for it. Go on, off you go. You can
no,
start.
I'm not going to just go. All right, then. All right. Basically...
this is your subject, so...
No, it's not just mine, is it? We picked it. But this is a little story that's fascinated me for quite a while. And it's full of different conspiracy theories, basically. And it basically involves a really small hilltop village in the south of France. And it involves a priest, predominantly, called Bérenger Saunière. Now, that name might sound familiar to you guys, because if you remember rightly, in the Da Vinci Code, Saunière was one of the lead characters that got murdered in the first chapter. So this is sort of where the name came from for the inspiration for Dan Brown. But he's actually a real character in history, Bérenger Saunière, and I do apologise for any pronunciations on any of these French words, everybody, because clearly we're not French. There's lots and lots of different stories, but it's absolutely, the whole area, I think, is worth noting, racked full of history and conflict and, you know, all that sort of thing that had gone on prior to Saunière actually getting the priesthood there. But what happened there? This is sort of the question, because Saunière was very poor when he first arrived in the village. We're going to go through all this in quite a lot of depth in a little bit, but he was quite poor, but he ended up being very rich, and people don't know how he got rich. So there's stories of buried treasure or parchments or uncovering secrets, and it is very, very involved, but we'll cover the basics of it. I think we won't get time to go right into depth because it could take hours, but That's basic story of what actually happened. But it's absolutely a fascinating little conspiracy theory surrounding facts. But as they said themselves, the people that live there, they say, like, trying to work out the truth from a lot of half-truths is very difficult.
Yeah, indeed. And it was based... The fact that he kept spending so much money, and he was like... although he was poor, but he was getting paid, wasn't he? Didn't he get paid something like 90 French francs a month or something as his salary?
900 francs a year.
Okay.
That was a year.
As you'll find, something like 660,000 francs.
Yeah,
I'm assuming
there's a big old difference. Big old difference there.
Yeah, there is. So, what do you think? He was on the make or something? Or?
I don't know, but I do know that I went right back because I wanted to. There's links with like the holy bloodline, in this area. Yep. So I went back to the beginning because this is basically where the whole thing starts. Now, it's why is this specific area of such interest in this way? And one of the conspiracy theories is it is to do with like the Holy Grail has been buried there, even down to the Ark of the Covenant at some point. The bloodline of Christ. All of that is in this surrounding area. This actually comes out of William of Orange, which was back in like 790. That's when William was actually confirmed in Charlemagne. Again, forget the pronunciations tonight because it was probably Charlemagne or something. But that's when he was first confirmed, after taking over from his dad, basically. Now, he was also called William Shortnose. Bless him. Because he had part of his nose cut off by a Saracen. But he continued the battle with the Moors that was going on at the time. Now, this battle had basically, they'd been able to penetrate France as far as Narbonne, and he raised the forces and defeated the Arabs around the area of Orange on the 30th of April 800, and that's how come he got William of Orange. Now, he gathered lots of titles, he was really famous, he was really like, woohoo, William, good boy. And he ended up becoming the Count of Orange and the Count of Razes. Now, Razes was the county where this chateau is basically. But it was before the chateau was there, it was named the Reda, or Reda, flip knows how you say it. Now, when he got that title, he became in control of that area, obviously. Now, him and his sons, William and his sons, fortified that whole area. William then founded a Benedictine abbey called Le Guillaume le Desert. You're going to get these little French accents all the way through because it makes it sound so much better. And a relic of the Holy Cross is supposed to have been housed there, which, is quite a thing, right? Yeah,
it would have been something that they would worship, wouldn't it? And at the end of the day, it connects them to their God.
That's right. Now, up to this point, he was very much Christian. Yep. That's why he was fighting the Christian cause against the Moors. Then all of a sudden, in 806, William withdrew from public and civil life and entered this monastery that he founded. At this time, he was supposed to have been, or alleged to have been, initiated into the Jewish faith of the Kabbalah. Because, they say, he found out a secret about his bloodline.
Okay, whose bloodline are we talking about? The William of Orange, or...
William of Orange's bloodline was supposed to have come down through the ages of the sacred bloodline, the holy bloodline of Christ.
Okay, so basically they're suggesting that he was the descendant of Christ.
Yeah. This is why he then was initiated into the Kabbalah. They can't prove this, by the way. This is just conjecture. But it does seem strange that all of a sudden he gets initiated into the Kabbalah in the monastery that he founded. It was a Benedictine monastery.
Yeah.
Right?
That is Strange.
Mm-hmm. Now, he was that well-renowned a character. He was actually named a saint twice. The last time was in 1066 by Pope Alexander II. Now, the actual monastery that he founded, the Le Guillaume de Desert, whatever it's called, actually became an important... Pardon?
Something the desert.
Yeah, something in the desert. Right, became important place of pilgrimage. William being the important focal point for that because of the history and his time spent there. And I believe his tomb, when he died, was there too. Now, he's in lots of famous works around this time, and the Grail is actually noted in these writings as being found in the Pyrenees, in the area that was actually owned by William. Now, he was the one who actually commissioned the Church of St. Mary Magdalene, which is the church we're going to be talking about in Rennes-le-Château. It was actually built by William, and they say it was built by him because there are architectural details that are the same from the monastery that he built to the church that was built. There's architectural similarities. Okay. William basically, after he passed, his descendants lost the area, the county, basically, in 844, and ownership passed to the counts of the Carcassonne. Can never say these words, it's very confusing. This is where we enter history of the Cathars, and all sorts of other tales appear around this, but that is basically where the initial link to the Holy Bloodline starts in this area through William of Orange.
Okay. See, I'm pretty much lost already, to be fair.
How can you be lost? It's quite simple.
Just okay, yeah. As far as that, okay, he's come along, he's built this church.
Yeah.
Then he switched religions for no apparent reason. And what happened next, sort of thing.
Well,
he built the St Mary Magdalene Church as well, yeah.
He was the one that first built the church at Rennes-le-Château, right? So that is where the church initially came from in the very first place.
And I'm assuming this church is a Jewish church.
Nope, it's called the Church of St Mary Magdalena.
Okay.
It's under the Pope. It's under the Catholic religion, believe it or not.
Okay, so he just basically pick and choose what religion he was then.
Kind of sounds like it, doesn't it? I think they swapped a lot.
Well, I'll be a Christian today.
Following that, the whole area is racked with lots of conflict, and the church gets knocked down and rebuilt, and knocked down and rebuilt, and knocked down and rebuilt. Quite a few times over the following years. So we're going to jump. So there's a lot of history in between that, but nothing major until we hit. I say nothing major because lots of things link back, you understand, when we talk about this. Now, basically, it's not a very big area at all. The village itself, when Saunier took over it, only had about 300 parishioners. So it's not a very big village where this church is. It's tiny, quite frankly. But it became really famous because in the mid-1950s, modern writings, such as the Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the Da Vinci Code, all of those kind of writings, linked the Holy Bloodline to this area, to this church.
Right, okay.
Okay?
Did they have any basis of fact to link it back?
There's lots of work that has been done, lots of research that has been done on this. Lots of links with lots of different things like Blanche of Castile, the Merovingians, the Knights Templar, the Cathars, Priory of Siren, the Holy Grail, Mary Magdalena, even the remains of Jesus are supposed to have been at this church. I think it's quite a busy little church. Considering it's been raised and rebuilt and raised and rebuilt again. But the area, or the main point of this, comes out of basically in 1870, where Berenguer Saunier took over the diocese. And so he became I looked into a little bit of him. So let's have a look a little bit about this guy's history, because I think this is quite integral, really, into this, of who he was, this priest that ended up taking over this church, and where all of this gets born from, all this conspiracy gets born from. So I had to look into him quite in depth, because I thought, well, he could have come from a rich family. You don't know, do you?
No, that's it. I mean, it's not far. Well, it's not that far fetched, is it? To be fair.
No, but there are leaps of, how can we put it? Good luck in his story.
Yeah.
That is a little strange. So anyway, he was born in the area, so he knew the area very, very well. He was the eldest son of 7, and back in that area, the eldest son always went into the clergy.
Yep.
Unfortunately, you didn't get a choice. You just did it because that was expected of you. In 1870, he entered the Grand Seminary in the city of Narbonne, and he was ordained as a priest in 1879. And he served as a curate in Alais-les-Bourgs for 3 years. This is all very background, okay? He was then given the parish of Leclat in 1882. Now, this links to a family called de Negre Diabla. Okay? Now, that family, in 2 months, he was there 2 months, and he got quite ingrained with this family. Again, this comes up later, so remember that name. But within 2 months, he was asked by his old professor to become a teacher in the seminary at Narbonne. That's not a long time to ingrain yourself with the family of the parish, is it, really?
It's not, but if they got on that well, then why not?
2 months, right? But he comes across at this point as very headstrong, very insolent, not a very nice person, to be fair.
Okay.
He does come across a bit up his own arse, to be fair. On June the 1st, in 1885, he was assigned to the parish of Rennes-le-Château. So he didn't get on very well as a teacher. So they assigned him to this tiny little parish of only 300 parishioners, which kind of gives you an indication he really wasn't liked. So they kicked him off.
Exactly. He's pretty much kicked out, basically, and told to go and serve somewhere else.
Just go into the country and be quiet over there, right?
That's it entirely.
He didn't do that. Saunier was only there 3 months when he made an anti-republican speech on the eve of the 1885 French elections, basically urging his parishioners to vote for the Union of Right. Now, this this reversed the anti-clerical legislations of the government and would have restored the French monarchy. He wasn't the only one. There were 3 other priests that were involved in this, but an inquiry into this was launched, and basically these 4 priests, Saunier included, were sort of suspended, really. Naughty. Shouldn't have said that, kind of thing. Insightful. It's not in your job remit, mate, quite frankly. His punishment was to return to the seminary in Narbonne, but again, he was only there 3 months before this happened. He was only at the chateau for 3 months, right? And the parishioners put so much pressure on the diocese for his return that he was reinstated in 1886.
Okay.
So he's got quite a force of character as this guy when you start looking at timelines and stuff. And they probably thought, we can't stand him here at the seminary. Let's just kick him back. They want him back, give him.
They can have him, sort of thing. Yeah.
I would think that's probably how it went. Now, when he returned, the parish was incredibly poor. He returned to the church was in ruins, and because of his stance against the state, they refused to pay him. So he basically was living off gratitude from his parishioners, and basically he was going hunting and fishing to supplement his food and stuff like that. And he was actually living not in a church; he was actually living with somebody in the village at the time. But he had been taken under the wing of the Comtesse of Chambord, which was the widow of Henry V, incidentally. So he mixes with quite high-ranking people.
Yeah.
And
maybe that's why they liked him so much.
Wow, it kind of makes you wonder what he was endowed with, is all I'm saying. He did have 1,000 francs, which was donated by the Comtesse for the restoration of the church. It's not a huge amount of money. Well, it would have been quite a bit back then, but
it would have been there,
for a restoration of a church... Bearing in mind, it was absolutely in ruins when he arrived,
and you'd have all the workers from the village as well. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
I suppose you could do some of the work for gratis.
Yeah, right now the church itself, the Church of Saint Mary Magdalena, has been destroyed and rebuilt several times, as we've said already, right? Yeah. But we don't know why it was dedicated to Mary Magdalena. We have no idea why it was actually dedicated to her in that particular area.
When it was originally built by whatever his geezer's name was, he was the apparent descendant of Jesus, so that would make it.
It gives you a little hint as to
the bloodline of Christ. So that could be his great grandmother or something.
Possibly. That could be why.
So if that's what he believed, then it's like...
Not too far a stretch, is it, to understand why he did
exactly.
that? Now, in 1646, it was completely restored by the Bishop of Alais, and it was from this point onwards that noblemen from the area were started to be buried within its crypt. So now this church has... Although it's at the time when Saunier took over it was in ruins... In 1646, it was restored fully, and noblemen were buried there. Again, this is quite relevant for, if there's buried treasure, noblemen being buried there. It's got the name of Mary Magdalena. It's, you can understand why this little church in this tiny little parish is quite important.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden.
And it makes me wonder whether or not these noblemen were buried with their fortunes as well.
Or even like trinkets, they would have been buried maybe with rings or necklaces, that sort of thing.
The Romans and things like that going back, they used to bury their, rich people with their gold and other treasures because they wanted to take them with them to the next life.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something they believed in that particular area. So they would have buried their noblemen with their treasures.
Possibly. That's one of the conspiracies, is that he was pillaging basic tombs. Now, when Saunier started the renovations, he had 1,000 francs from the Comtesse of Chambord and a small loan from the parish council. And he started with the basics, the roof and the windows. Now, it is said that during these renovations, Saunier allegedly found some parchments that led him to find some treasure. Now, he allegedly found this in, the timeline is between 1887 and 1890, and the bell ringer, Antoine Captier, noticed a small glass vial sticking out of a wooden balustrade of the old pulpit. Now, he gave this to Saunier and said, "Oh, look what I've just found, mate," kind of thing. And they say that this is where he started finding stuff. This was the missing link of how he found stuff. Now, it was either contained a parchment that told him where things were, or it gave him a secret which led to other parchments that he then found. They're not sure.
Yeah, I've also read somewhere, possibly one of the other web pages that you sent me to look at, that people have studied this piece of wood where he was supposed to have found this glass vial with the paper in it, but they couldn't. They said that it never had a hollow compartment, so they discount that.
Yeah.
So I wonder where that came from. Maybe it's saying that he had in his own pocket and said, "Look what I found, Guff."
Who knows, right? This, what's interesting is even the descendants today of Antoine Captier think or believe this is what happened. So that within the family, even now, the descendants seriously believe that he was the one, the bell ringer was the one that found it and just gave it to Saunier.
Oh, that was nice of him, wasn't it?
You know, so who knows what happened there. Now, there's nothing that's said in the accounts of the church, which, you know, as you all know, they're supposed to write a log.
Yep.
And there's nothing detailed in those. But it was soon after this event that Saunier restored the stone square that sits in front of the church, restored the walls, and installed a locked gate. But the locked gate was only sort of like a knee-high one. It wasn't very big, so you could jump over it quite easily at this point. But he's starting to set boundaries around that area, isn't he? That's what that indicates to me.
Yeah, he's trying to keep people away, sort of like my private area, keep out sort of thing.
Yeah. In 1891, Saunier wrote in his journal, "Discovery of a tomb, rain in the evening." Now, that was in his journal, but he doesn't detail what tomb it was. He doesn't detail anything apart from discovery of a tomb. Now, the next day, a pot was found with some gold coins inside. Saunier told the workmen that they were just worthless lord's medals, you know, from the pilgrimage place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that place. And sent workmen home and suspended all work on the church until the 14th of October. In between that, he travelled to Carcassonne. As I say, I don't know if I'm pronouncing these right, but we'll go with it. Consulted 4 other priests. They returned with him on the 6th of October. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows what they did. Nobody knows what was discussed. But work was resumed on the 14th of October with a new crew of men. Not the old crew, a new crew.
See, that particular part makes me wonder whether it was actually connected to the Knights Templar. Because Knights Templar was dissolved way back in 1312, and we're talking about 18-something, aren't we? Mm-hmm. That this treasure was found. So maybe he consulted other priests that would know about Templar strongholds.
Possibly.
Because if the church was used as a Knights Templar stronghold, the Knights Templar was like mega rich anyway, because they acted basically as the first bank for many countries and people.
Yeah, true, they did.
So maybe it could be connected to that. That's sort of where I would have thought.
Or if it's parchments and proving the bloodline of Christ, he might be thinking, jeepers, you know, jeepers, this is proving something that goes kind of against what the church is saying. I better talk to somebody about this. We honestly don't know what was said.
Yeah,
none of it's documented. So it's purely speculation about what they did when he returned. But the renovations continued on the 14th of October. Now, it was at this point that Saunier started acting a bit bizarre. He started spending increasing amounts of money. Where did that money come from? And he also started digging at night, not too suspicious, right, in the graveyard, with his housemaid, Marie Dunoret. Right, now Marie is quite integral in the rest of this story because he seems to do everything after this point with this housemaid. She's just a housemaid. She's just like a village girl that cleans his house. But all of a sudden, he starts digging at night in the graveyard with her. Now, some of these holes were said to have been 3 metres down.
Okay, so what would that be in feet? Because I mean, my maths is
I don't
rubbish.
know. Quite a long way. It's quite deep.
Okay. I'm just wondering whether it's like the regulatory 6 foot deep thing.
Oh, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I would have thought it was deeper than that. In March of 1895, the authorities investigated his behaviour because people were worried that he was in the parish. People were worried that he was desecrating graves by his behaviour. And, you know, that kind of...
Well, you would think that.
You would, but anyway, they investigated him and they sort of was like, well, he seems all right, so don't worry about it. And there was witness testimonies and stuff like that. And Marie actually did say that Saunier had offered Marie antique jewellery, which suggested the pillaging tombs of the lords that were buried there. It does seem a little strange, right? All of a sudden he goes, oh, look, I found this piece of jewellery, have it? Or did he buy that with this strange amount of money? Maybe it wasn't just unworthy Lord Ayres medals that were found. Maybe it was coinage that was really worth a lot of money. Who knows?
Yeah.
But around this...
I would think that he was pillaging from the bodies, to be fair. Especially if it was jewellery, and as I said, if that sort of era they believed that burying noblemen with their treasures, it's not a huge, giant step in the wrong direction to think that.
Around this time, Saunier also started taking trips for longer periods of time, but would set it up so he looked like he was still there. So he would write letters without dates, and then if correspondence came in, Marie would actually write the right date on it and post it back out. So he was actively hiding his absence and activities from the parish. They just knew he was going for trips, and then they'd write letters and stuff like that. It was all got a bit subversive. It all got very secretive at this time.
Yeah.
And then in 1894, he actually installed an iron gate blocking total access to the cemetery, which actually included the study and library. Now, this gave Saunier complete control over who came and went in the church grounds in the whole area. So that's quite a big thing for a village when you do something like that, right?
Yeah, and not being funny, I mean, as you get older, you don't want strangers knocking on your front door anyway, do you?
Mate, he's a vicar. He's like a parish bloke. He's supposed to be accessible to his parishioners.
He must get fed up with it. Like the little old granny, forgive me, Father, if I've sinned and all that. And it's like, oh, not good. Really?
It's only
You're 95 years old, woman. Sort it out.
Sort it out. But in 1895, he actually refused entry to the pump that was within the grounds. And the water was integral because they needed to help fight a fire. So these kind of behaviours were really starting to worry his parishioners. Yeah. I mean, that's quite a big thing. There's a fire, we need the water, and you're not going to give us access to it. He was becoming very weird and very peculiar. But when you think about his character, what we know about from how he gets shipped off to this little backwater, it kind of... he also had some form of... He obviously had that kind of power of personality as well.
Yeah.
Now, in 1897, the church was actually finished and inaugurated again. Beautiful, lovely, looks all pretty. Everybody's happy. Finally, it's all done. Yep. And in 1898, Saunier actually visited Lyon, where the Bishop Billard nominated him for the function of personate. But the diocese refused, as the bishop himself, Bishop Billard, was actually under investigation.
Okay.
Now, he's like mates with this bloke, but all of a sudden he's now not going to get this nice little accolade.
They've been giving each other backhanders and
stuff. Well,
possibly,
but in 1901... Saunier had pretty much bought all of the land on the hilltop surrounding the Rennes-le-Château. But he didn't buy it in his name. He bought it in Marie's name.
Oh, tax write-off.
He also started building a lavish mansion called the Villa Bethania. Now, in the same year, 1901, Bishop Billard died. All of a sudden, very suddenly he died. And it turned out that he had staggering debts, this guy.
Okay. Maybe that's why he's under investigation.
Well, maybe, just maybe, he was giving Saunier some money, so maybe there was a blackmailing situation going on. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Huge possibility.
Mm-hmm. Now, in 1903, Saunier suddenly had trouble paying some debts, but he continued to carry on building and entertaining to great expense. He was very lavish with his entertaining. He had lots of people visit him, and he gave them a party, mate. I'll tell you, it was really, you know, it was a bit like Hugh Hefner kind of character. He was that lavish with his entertaining. Marie was baptised La Madonna and was dressed in the latest Paris fashions, which actually didn't do her any favours within the village. But this didn't change the loyalty of his parishioners to Sonia. They were jealous of her, but not of him. They didn't blame him. They were looking at her and going, why are you getting all these accolades from him? But their loyalty to him was unwavering.
Yeah. I mean, maybe because she had a connection to, was it Henry V, didn't you say?
No, Marie was the housekeeper. The Comtesse was the widow of Henry V, who gave him £1,000 to do the renovation in the first place. Right?
Okay.
Now, in 1906, Sonia, he doesn't stop spending, this guy. And if you look at, you can find pictures of the Villa Bethania online, and trust me, it's quite an impressive building. Okay, and it's got landscaped gardens and everything. In 1906, Sonia actually commissioned a road, to be built for. I really need to watch what I'm writing in my research. To be built from Cusa to the Rennes-le-Château, but it didn't get finished until 6 years after his death. Okay.
Well, you know why? Because they didn't have the Irish to build the roads for them.
Then that might be it, right?
Yeah.
In 1906, the new bishop who took over from Bishop Billard visited, and actually was a bit like, what the heck is going on here? You know, he was very shocked at the standard of living and entertaining, and he was also concerned because there was an underage girl present. So there was lots of things he was like, red flag moments, do you know what I mean, for this new bishop. And when he got talking to the villagers, the jealousies that were undercurrent against Marie started to come out, and basically an investigation was started against Saunier.
Okay.
Now, it takes a little while, apparently, because it all seems to be 3 years, 3-year stretches, this little timeline, you know it is. Because in January 1909, Saunier was given 1 week's notice to leave and was actually transferred to the village of Costouges, or wherever it is. But he refused to leave, right? I could just imagine. He must have been so bloody minded, this bloke. Because he refused to leave. He set up an altar in the Villa de Bethania, and continued to perform mass for the parish. Now, the newly appointed priest for the Church of Mary Magdalena wasn't getting no attendance at the church itself. They were all going to the villa. So he was like...
It's almost like the 300 villagers are almost like brainwashed to follow him.
It sounds very cultish, doesn't it, at this point?
It does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It does. There's no denying, because how weird is that? They won't go to the church, but they'll go to the villa and still have continued mass from Sonia.
Yeah.
Weird in itself, but then, you know.
But then if he's overspending, you don't know what he's bribed them with. I mean, he's already given them lavish parties.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so is he paying his congregation to turn up?
Who knows? But the newly appointed priest left. He really wasn't happy. Goes back to Narbonne, moans, the increasing investigation, and basically the following allegations were made against Saunier, which were then taken to trial. He was accused of mass trafficking, which basically mass trafficking is charging your parishioners for extra mass. And it used to be, if I remember rightly, £1 per mass. But if you look at the amount of people he's got, that's not going to account for the amount of money he was spending. No,
that's it. Even if they, wanted 1 mass each, that's only 300 francs, isn't it?
Yeah, a week. It's
so
not a lot.
That wouldn't count for his 660,000 francs he's spending.
No.
Unless they're having 20 masses a day.
Which villager could afford that,
Exactly.
He refused to produce sources of his income, so he didn't he wouldn't give them any account records of the money he spent and where it's coming from. He wouldn't give them that. And he continued, and the other charge was he was continuing to do mass against the orders of the bishop, because obviously the bishop's like, no, you're suspended, you can't do that. We've given you some new person to do it, but you continue to do it. Now, he was set trial twice, and he didn't bother turning up. So what they did was they were like, oh, well, never mind. We'll just suspend him for a month and give him a small fine.
Yeah.
Which you would think he'd been quite happy with, considering he's got away with it, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, no. He's that bloody minded, this man. He wasn't happy with that and demanded to be reinstated in the church. Straight away. He wouldn't want none of this suspension malarkey. He was like, no.
It's a shame he didn't write a book about this.
Well, there's lots of books been written about this. So they continued the investigations and the trials continued. And again, Saunier failed to provide evidence and didn't turn up to trial dates or any directions from the court. And it ended up with being him totally suspended from the priesthood. He appealed to Rome and the suspension was lifted, but they wouldn't reinstate him in the church.
Just sounds like he was a bit of a troublemaker and they just wanted rid then, doesn't it?
Well, it does really, but he's getting a bit older by now, because in the 17th of January 1917, Saunier was actually found collapsed and died 5 days later. Now, the Abe Riviera de Esperanza attended him to take his last confession. Now, afterwards, this guy was said to have refused to perform the last rites and never smiled again.
Okay.
That's alleged, by the way. That's like one of all the rumours surrounding this. This is like one that's like the cherry on the top of the cake. This one, you know what I mean? Which leads to a lot of speculation as regarding what Saunier was doing and what he confessed to Riviera. Yeah. And who knows? Because that's sacred, isn't it? Sacred, or whatever the words are. It never gets revealed, your last rites and all that, does it? Or your last confession never gets revealed. No. So we'll never know from that angle. But it does ask several questions. How did he come across these large sums of money in such a small village?
Yeah, that is a bit odd, to be fair. And, we've already touched on the fact that he could have been pilfering from the dead bodies, but then that's only going to give you so much. It's not going to give you an endless supply of money.
No, it's not.
So is someone paying him off to keep him quiet about something? That's another strong possibility.
It could have actually been a multiple source income, if you think about it. He could have been. He could have found out a secret and was being paid off for that, which was why the other 4 priests that he took back to the chateau attended. He could have been blackmailing other bishops on information he had about them as people. Yeah. He could have been involved in very well-to-do families. It's been proved that some of the well-to-do families he's been involved with, he's the widow of bloody Henry V, and the Negre de Diablo family. These are very big, well-to-do, rich families. So he's involved with those. And the pillaging of the tombs as well, possibly. So it could be a multifaceted thing. But it has been said that he sold his soul to the devil because he wasn't happy in a poor parish. Yeah, I'm not too keen on that one. I don't like that one, no?
No, we throw that one out. That's rubbish.
Now, after he died, the estate, we'll call it, was actually bought by a guy called Noel Corbeau, and Marie de Narnaud, or whatever her name was, the faithful housekeeper that worked with old Saunier, said that she knew a secret that would make whoever knew it extremely wealthy. Now, when Noel purchased the estate, she told him she would tell him the secret before she died. However, bless her, she actually had a fit before she died that left her unable to write or speak, and she never divulged the secret.
That's so gutting.
I know, right? That's pretty like, oh my God! A frustrated moment, right? Now, in the 1950s, Corbu and Noel began circulating stories that Saunier was in possession of parchments that he found whilst renovating the church, and that these were linked to the treasure of the Blanche de Castile, supposedly amounting to 28,500,000 gold pieces. That's a heck of a lot of money, right?
That is, isn't it?
In gold pieces. You can imagine how many bags of, gold coins this would be.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't last that long if he's spending copious amounts of money all the time.
Well, this is true. Now, this money was treasure allegedly linked to the French crown, which could be, if it was linked to the French crown, why his stance on restoring the French monarchy was so strong.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Okay, now this was the treasure of the French crown, assembled by Blanche de Castile, who was wife of Louis the V111, whatever that is. It the 8th? Louis the 8th?
7th.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, it's 7th. Okay, it might be 8th, yeah.
Yeah, to pay the ransom of her son, Louis the 1X, whatever that is. I don't know French numeral, Roman numerals at all.
That'd be 9th.
Okay. To pay the ransom of her son, who was actually captured during a crusade. Good old crusades. They were a bit murky themselves, weren't they? And the surplus of this... the surplus... See, when you start talking crusades, your brain immediately jumps to... What does it jump to? The Knights Templar, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So... all these links come in. The surplus was said to have been hidden at the Rennes-le-Château. Now, in the 1960s, Noel's story took a life on their own, and basically the interest in this case of Saunier and the money and the history surrounding it and all the conspiracy theories basically reached a famous a French draftsman who basically was famous for claiming to be a direct Merovingian, however you say that word, descendant, and being the principal perpetrator of the Priory of Sion. Plantard adapted Noel's story, intertwined it with mythical accounts of the Priory, which basically inspired the 1967 book Le Hors de Rennes by author Gérard de Sade. And this is where it all comes from. Basically, all comes from there.
Awesome. So we all know about it now. So we're all going to go for the Rennes and
start digging.
Have a look. Yeah.
I mean, that was the birth of it, really. That is where all of this comes from. It is unusual. It is very, very conspiracy. It's just perfect conspiracy material. And it, once Noel started putting out stories and stuff like that, the first book was written. Then you've got Holy Blood, Holy Grail, then the Da Vinci Code, and documentaries have been made about this. It's basically taken on an entire life of its own, really. And there's just so many hypotheses and possibilities of where this could come or where all this happened. But we still don't know what treasure was found.
No, that's it. Until last week when you brought this subject to the table, I didn't know nothing about Rennes-le-Château at all. Never heard of it whatsoever. But I knew about the Knights Templar. I know about the Bloodline of Christ and other stories surrounding it, but I just didn't know about Chateau le Rennes or Rennes-le-Château or whatever it's called. I can understand all these different links to it. With the Knights Templar, no one really knows what treasures they had. They were the first banks, but they were also rumoured to have the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. But then if you're thinking that the Holy Grail is more like the bloodline of Christ, so they would have had the secrets to the bloodline of Christ. And they had churches and strongholds all over the country to operate as their bank, as they would. Just no different from Barclays, really. They got
the old style Barclays Bank, everybody. You heard it here first.
So, if if this guy did discover any of the secrets, especially with the bloodline of Christ, then the Vatican are going to want to shut him up. So, are they going to be giving him money to say, look, just keep your mouth shut, we don't want this, because it'll destroy us? Or did they actually find gold coins and stuff that the Templars had in their stronghold at Rennes-le-Chateau?
It is really interesting, isn't it, of what could it have been? I think one of the things to consider is when he hit money troubles and had a little bit of a dip in the old money stakes around 1903, wasn't it? They say that he had money stashed abroad. So when he went travelling, it was because the money wasn't local, as it were. It was like he stashed it in different countries. So the outbreak of the war would have sort of put a stop to him getting access to his money, which, is a possibility. I mean, and God, if you're going to find something like that, you're not going to put it in your local parish bank, are you? Or you're going to be sensible and sort of like put it somewhere else.
It does surprise me then that if it was found after the war, why did Hitler not find it? Because he was very big on religious artifacts already. He was already in search of the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail. So why didn't he find that connection?
Well, he probably did, actually, but as I say, they've not found anything there, and that whole area has been dug over many times. In fact, there's now a banning order for digging in that whole area. It's like a honeycomb, apparently, with the amount of digging that's gone on. Nothing more has been found in that area. If it was parchments, then it's a possibility that the 4 priests that went back with him after they found the gold coins, the pot of gold coins, took those back to Rome. And like you say, they were giving him regular payoffs, which could also account for why all of a sudden not attending trials and stuff like that. He got off very lightly in that. And even when he appealed to Rome, they sort of lifted his suspension but didn't reinstate him. But even that's basically saying, carry on doing what you're doing. You're all right, so you're not going to get into the church again, but... we ain't gonna worry about it too much. It just seems a little bizarre that they took such
a... It looks like someone was looking out for him.
It looks that way, but then we do know that the church amongst themselves look after each other. They do things to be seen to be doing stuff when they're not actually doing that much. Possibly, I don't know, but you get a do-gooder bishop that comes along, and the Roman contingency are like, oh damn it. You know what I mean? Because who knows, he may have been blackmailing the Bishop Billard. You don't know, do you? But it's all very strange is what I would say. The whole thing is all very, very a little bit weird. And there's huge histories around this area. I mean, I say we covered William d'Orange right at the beginning, only because that indicates where the church came from in the first place and the initial links to the bloodline. But after him, there is a huge amount of history surrounding that area that we've jumped. So we literally jumped from where the church was built to Saulnier. You can imagine there's hundreds and hundreds of years of history in between that. Now I'm going to share a link into the chat room if you found the tale fascinating and want to look at this a bit more with a lot more history, which is basically everything you would want to know about this particular case. But it is fascinating. It is a fascinating little story.
And I must admit, as I said, I didn't know nothing about it last week. But after tonight, I still don't know too much. But but no, I've got the research, and you know what? I'm gonna look into it more because I want to know a little bit more about it, especially with the Knights Templar, because everyone knows I like the Knights Templar.
Yeah, you do love your Knights Templar, don't you?
I do, absolutely. So that's one of my research projects at some point.
Now that it is known, I'll just give you a little hint on the old Knights Templar link. They definitely had a presence in that region. There was actually a commandery at the Champagne-sur-Oulde and an observation post on Mount Bezu, or however you say it. Now, the Templars weren't allowed to have personal belongings, so all their treasures belonged to the order and passed through the order through the ages. And if they buried something there,
yeah,
and I don't know, something happened and they never went back to collect it, could that be what he found?
Again, that's a possibility, because as I said earlier, if they used Rennes-le-Château as a stronghold or buried some of their treasures there, so that King, I think it was Philip, who gave the order for them all to be executed in 1312, on Friday the 13th as well, then there could have been a chance that they were captured in the first wave that were captured. So never had the chance to go back to get it, because there's a lot of stories that the Knights Templar fled. Some got absorbed into other orders. Some just vanished. There was some that travelled up to Scotland and then off to God knows where else after that. So the Knights Templar just scattered.
I don't blame them, do you?
No, I don't blame them at all. No. You would, if you was ordered to be executed, then you'd want to run. And
how much of it was lost? How much of their belongings that belonged to the order were lost in that time? Because, like you say, if you've got to then be forced underground, as it were, there's probably a lot of things that you would leave behind. But there is a huge conspiracy. If it is to do with the bloodline of Christ, that was to be protected. That was like the most important thing to be protected of the Knights Templar, if that is true.
Yeah, and if they buried the truth or buried their treasure, whatever happens, they might not have had a chance to go back for it, or they might, through the years, it might just got forgotten.
True. We will never know. I feel a lot of investigations have been done into this. A lot of architectures, not architects.
Archaeologists.
That's the word. Thank you very much. It's an archae something or other. Archaeology has been done on this. Lots of work has been done through various archives to pull out a lot of information about this. But unless we get a definitive report that tells us exactly what it was, which I feel probably would be in the vaults at the Vatican, if anywhere,
I thought so.
We're never going to know. But it makes a fascinating tale, right, everybody?
Sure does. Absolutely. So, anyway, on that note, we have come to the end of the show. We've got 2 minutes left.
Wow. Gosh, that went quick.
So, I know. I've just learnt so much. So what's coming up for the rest of the week?
Okay, so on a Haunted Histories tomorrow night with Penny, she is talking all about the Kurzel, which is down south in Seafront, not far from me.
Or me.
I know, right? She's going local. On PSH Radio on Thursday evening, they've got the lovely Barry John in the studio, psychic comedian Barry John. He is a darling. I love that man. He's brilliant. And on Friday evening, Mark and myself, and hopefully Carl Hutchinson, are discussing our sinkholes, highways to hell, the myths and legends surrounding them.
Ooh, that sounds good.
What are we talking about next week?
Next week we are going to tackle the subject of gods of Egypt.
Gods of Egypt.
Yeah. So you're going to be dancing around like Egyptian.
Or not. We're going Egypt, are we?
Yes. We're going to visit the Egyptians and look at their gods and belief systems and stuff like that. So
cool.
It's going to be a very interesting one next week.
Yeah, it sounds it. I know little bits. I know little bits,
Yeah,
but not huge amounts.
No, so yeah, we'll be researching that one for next week.
Yeah, cool.
All good. So yes, that's it for tonight, everybody. So thanks everyone that joined us in the chat room. Absolute pleasure seeing you all there, and thank you, Kerry, for joining me and doing the research, because that was just like amazing stuff.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I did learn loads, and I'm gonna follow up and maybe we could do another show on it or something.
Oh gosh.
Well, I mean, we only touched on really the Knights Templar links to it, so I'm sure there's others as well that we could go into.
Oh God, there's loads and loads. As I say, we missed out a huge chunk of history in the middle of that, but as I say, we would have been here till midnight if we'd gone into it. So I kind of wanted to just sort of like reference where the first reference to the Holy Bloodline was, and actually Saunier himself, and go through that side of things really, because that's where the mystery all starts from. But hopefully everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah, maybe we could tackle it from like the Bloodline of Christ aspect. That's yeah, we could do that.
Gosh,
absolutely.
You do like to tackle difficult ones, don't you?
It's fascinating. It's absolutely amazing. So anyway, see you all next week. So it's good night from me.
And it's good night from me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.